Queen Gorgo narrates about King Darius leading his army of Persians into Greece in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC during the first Persian invasion of Greece. The Athenian general Themistocles led his army against them at the shores. The Greeks brutally killed all of them one by one as blood splatters. Themistocles releases a bow just in time for Darius's son Xerxes to watch. He runs to his father's side but is too late to save him as the arrow pierces him. Xerxes holds his father in his arms and locks eyes with Themistocles. The latter walks away, with Gorgo stating that he knew in his heart that he made a mistake not killing Xerxes when he had the chance. Darius is returned to his kingdom to lie on his deathbed. He and Xerxes are joined by Artemisia, Darius's commanding naval officer. In his dying moments, he tells Xerxes that it is best to leave the Greeks alone, for only the gods can defeat those beasts. Artemisia pulls the arrow out of his chest and is suffering. For a week, Xerxes sits and mourns the death of his father. On the 8th day, Artemisia holds Xerxes and tells him that his father's last words were not a warning, a challenge. If only the gods can defeat the Greeks, he should become a god. Artemisia sends Xerxes into the desert wearing chains until he walks into a cave with a pool of bright gold liquid. Xerxes steps in and emerges with a golden tinge and fiery red eyes, also hairless and much taller. Meanwhile, Artemisia kills off all of the former allies of the man that Xerxes used to be. He returns to Persia and stands before the citizens as he declares war. 10 years later in 480 BC, Xerxes makes plans to lead his army on land through Thermopylae, while Artemisia is prepared to ready her navy at sea. The second Persian invasion of Greece begins. In Athens, Themistocles meets with the council to discuss his naval strategy for taking on the invading Persians. He also tells the council that he will seek help from the Spartans. Themistocles travels to Sparta to request help from King Leonidas and his army. Themistocles encounters Diliobus, who tells him that Leonidas has already begun to lead his men on foot, adding that he already dealt with the emissaries sent from Persia. Queen Gorgo speaks with Themistocles to tell him that the Spartans do not share the same ideal of free nation in the same way that he does. Meanwhile, a prisoner is brought before Artemisia on her ship. He chastises 2 of her guards for being Greeks working under a woman. Artemisia grabs her sword and brutally decapitates the man. She sees a soldier on the ship from which she is unfamiliar with. He instantly attacks and kills several Persians. He is Silius, an Athenian soldier sent to spy on the Persians. He jumps into the sea and avoids being hit by the arrows of the Persians. Silius, along with his son Callisto, reports back to Themistocles and his lieutenant Achailos. Silius tells them that the Persians are being led at sea by Artemisia. It is believed that she is the sole survivor of an attack on her town. Through a flashback, we learn the disturbing background story of Artemisia as a child and how dangerous she is now. Even with this knowledge in mind, Themistocles prepares his strategy for the battle. Achailos points out that their small navy against the much larger Persian navy outnumbers them and that the mission is suicide. Themistocles, confident in his men, leads them all out to the Aegean Sea, where Artemisia is leading her navy. Her general, Artaphernes, tells her that General Bandary has prepared his strategy to lead the ships against the Greeks. Themistocles stirs up confidence by encouraging the men to fight with those standing by their side. The Athenians ram their ships into the Persian ships, charging at them with full force and fury. This leads to another brutal and bloody fight, with many Persians dying at the hands of the Athenians. Silius and Callisto fight side by side, with Callisto hurling his spears at the Persians. Artemisia, displeased with the results, has Bandary chained and thrown into the sea, where he sinks to his watery grave. The generals think she is disappointed with the loss of her men, but she admits to being disappointed in them specifically. She ponders the thought of having somebody standing by her side. The next day, the Athenians cause the Persians to sail their ships through a crevice, causing the leading ship to get stuck and have the other ships crash into it. From atop the cliffs, the Athenians jumps in and continue to cruelly slaughter the Persians as blood spills. The second general to lead them, Kashani, is also violently killed by Themistocles. Silius sees Callisto jumping into the fight, but not wanting to see his son get hurt. Artemisia watches from her ship, admiring Themistocles' tactics and command. Artaphernes rides a boat to the shores where the Athenians have set up camp to bring Themistocles onto Artemisia's barge. She commends his skill during the battle when she takes him into her private chambers. She asks him if there happens to be somebody back in Athens for whom he fights. Themistocles states that he has had no time for a family or children. Artemisia offers him a chance to join her so that he will not have to live with conflict or responsibility. Themistocles states that he has had no time for a family or children. The 2 of them roughly get intimate with each other as the guards also hear them. When Artemisia echoes her offer, Themistocles simply states no. Artemisia angrily throws him off of her, hissing to him that he is no god, but merely a man. Themistocles returns to the camp, warning his men that Artemisia is prepared to bring hell to them. On the next day of battle, the Persian ships release tar into the ocean, along with several guards swimming out to the Athenians with explosives strapped to their backs. The Athenians fight off the guards until Artemisia fires her arrows. The Persians hurl flaming arrows to ignite the tar. Artemisia fires more arrows, striking 3 into Silius as Callisto watches. On one of the Persian ships, a large Persian hurls torches to continue igniting the fires. He is struck with an arrow, and he drops the torch on himself, setting himself ablaze. He falls off the ship into the spilling tar, sending a wave of fire onto an Athenian ship, but also back onto the Persian ship, causing it to explode. Artemisia sends another flaming arrow to hit the back of a Persian with an explosive on his back, just as he climbs onto Themistocles' ship. He orders everyone to abandon the ship, and he lunges toward the Persian. Before he can strike him, the explosive goes off and destroys the ship, taking Themistocles down with it. Artemisia watches proudly as her enemy sinks. In the ocean, Themistocles sinks among the bodies of his fallen comrades. He sees 2 serpent-like creatures swim to them and devour them before one lunges at him. Themistocles is snapped out of this dream by Callisto. He realizes this event may have been brought upon him to subdue his ego or to remind him of the mistake of not killing Xerxes. Themistocles walks over to Silius' side as he is dying. He urges his friend to continue the fight and tells him something else before finally passing. Themistocles mourns his friend. Callisto asks Themistocles what his father's last words were, but Themistocles says he will tell him in time. Meanwhile, on land, Xerxes and his army have just killed off Leonidas and his 300 Spartans after the brutal 3-day battle of Thermopylae. This is a brief flashback to the previous film. The birds pick at the eyes of the dead Spartans while the Persians continue marching onward victoriously toward Athens. The news of the defeat reaches Themistocles through a messenger. He returns to Sparta to confront Ephialtes, the deformed hunchback that betrayed the Spartans and sold them out to Xerxes. Seemingly remorseful for his actions, he does not cower when Themistocles lowers his sword to him, saying that there is little beauty in him and even less in what he's done. Ephialtes adds that Xerxes is leading his army to Athens, preparing to destroy it. Themistocles leaves him alive so that he may carry the message back to the Persians, saying that the Greeks will fight to the death. Themistocles goes to speak to Queen Gorgo. Dilios, now half-blind, warns him to not expect a warm welcome. Gorgo is still mourning her husband. Although Themistocles urges her to aid in the continuing battle, she refuses to send any more husbands, fathers, and sons out to be sacrificed any further. He hands her the sword of Leonidas, saying it belongs with her. Gorgo tears up at the sight of it. The Persian army takes Athens. Xerxes holds the head of Leonidas boastfully over the city as his men lay waste to the people and burn everything down. He continues to brag about his victory and states that Themistocles was nothing but a coward. Ephialtes returns to Xerxes and Artemisia to report that the Greeks are continuing to take their battle back into the sea, led again by Themistocles. Hearing his name and realizing he's not dead, Artemisia vows to end the Athenians once and for all. She leaves to prepare her command. Themistocles acknowledges that his men may be weary of continuing the fight, knowing they too would refuse to see any more bloodshed. He encourages them to act for themselves and leave now if they wish so that they may maintain their freedom, but also encourages them to stay and fight. The limited number of Athenian ships face the huge Persian fleet at the sea in their final battle. Themistocles tells Callisto of his father's final words, which was to say that he has earned himself a place at the table. Once again, both Themistocles and Artemisia are set to lead their men into battle. The climatic naval battle of Salamis begins. Their ships collide and the Athenians charge against the Persians. Not ready to stand idly by, Artemisia wields her 2 swords and fights against the Greeks, mercilessly killing off as many as she can on her own. Themistocles rides his horse through the battle until he reaches Artemisia's ship. He reminds her of her earlier offer, stating that he still says no. Angered, she begins to fight him in a duel. They continue to fight until they hold both their swords at each other's necks. Themistocles continues to refuse the idea of joining Artemisia, and he tells her that it is time for her to surrender. We see Gorgo leading her army of Spartans, having been telling them the story from the beginning, leading into her own rousing speech as they come closer to surrounding the Persian fleet. In addition, armies from other allied nations join in the fight. Themistocles points this out to Artemisia as he still has her with his sword to her throat. He urges her to surrender. She chooses not to, and she grabs her sword to kill, but Themistocles quickly drives his sword into her stomach. Artemisia drops to her knees. In her final moments, she watches as the allied forces surround her navy. Xerxes, watching from the cliffside, turns his back on her. Artemisia finally collapses dead just as Gorgo and Dilios step onto her ship to stand by Themistocles. The film ends with the Spartans and Athenians banding together to defeat the Persians once and for all. It was later recorded in history that the naval battle of Salamis was one of the most decisive battles of the ancient world, and the allied Athenian-Spartan victory forced the Persians to retreat from Greece for good. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.